Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Wednesday, December 7th. It is 9:31 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow colleagues here. Remotely, we have Board Member Nicole Morgan and Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo. Here in the room, we have Board Member Laurel Firestone and Board Member Sean McGuire. Additionally, we have our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, our Chief Deputy, Jonathan Bishop. Serving as our Clerk of the Board today is Courtney Tyler, and assisting her is Margie Arjul and Biba Malatik. As you can see, this meeting is being webcast and recorded. And it is a hybrid meeting. You're either viewing us from our traditional webcast on YouTube Live or the Cal EPA website. But if you intend to comment on any item today on today's agenda, you need to be on the Zoom platform. There are instructions on how to do so at the top of today's agenda, but if you're having any challenges getting on the platform, you can email our clerk at commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov, and you will be helped to get on the platform. Once you're on the platform, your camera will be off, you will be muted until it's your turn to speak on the item you requested to speak on. And for those of you in the room, good morning, good to see you. We're here in the Cal EPA building in Sacramento. Please quickly just observe the exits. If there's for some reason some emergency, we'll all calmly file out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and await further instruction. If you intend on commenting on any of today's items, there is a tablet over at, I believe, over by the clerk. And otherwise, there's a QR code on the side of the room, which allows you to sign up. Once you are at the podium, please do state your name and any affiliation you have. And importantly as well, please turn off your noise-making devices, as the previous chair would say, and otherwise appreciate your attendance. With that out of the way, we can get to our first item of today's second board meeting day, and item number 11. And I have a statement to read to you all. Welcome to this informational item on the 2002 Special Report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, also known as the SWRCB. This item will include discussion of recommended compliance date extensions for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, Ormond Beach, and Scattergood generating stations. We will have a presentation by State Board staff and members of SWRCB, as well as a presentation by the State Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, followed by public comments. Mr. Dolan, an environmental scientist at the State Water Board, and Ms. Gutierrez and Ms. Tesfaye are representing the SWRCB and will now proceed with the first presentation.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Dolan, and I'm an environmental scientist in the State Water Board's Division of Water Quality. I'll be presenting on the 2022 Special Report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, or the SWRCB, with recommendations on compliance dates for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, Ormond Beach, and Scattergood generating stations. We'll be hearing from representatives of the SWRCB in this presentation. We will also be hearing from representatives of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, or LADWP, in a presentation that will follow this one. Next slide. Today, I'll give a brief summary of the purpose of the SWRCB and the final 2022 Special Report of the SWRCB, or Special SWRCB Report. The SWRCB is an advisory committee that advises the State Water Board on implementation of the water quality control policy on the use of coastal and estuarine waters for power plant cooling, also known as the Once Through Cooling, or OTC policy, to ensure power plant compliance schedules are consistent with local and statewide grid reliability needs. The SWRCB consists of representatives from the California Public Utilities Commission, California Energy Commission, California Independent System Operator, California Air Resources Board, California Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, and of course, the State Water Resources Control Board. The SWRCB convenes on a periodic basis to consider a draft SWRCB report, which includes the status of OTC power plant compliance and recommendations to ensure grid reliability. The draft 2022 special report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures was released on September 19th, 2022, and the SACWIS convened and approved the special SACWIS report on September 30th, 2022. Next slide. And I'll now pass it to my colleagues from the California Energy Commission and California Public Utilities Commission.
Good morning. My name is Alicia Gutierrez, and I'm the Director of the Energy Assessments Division within the California Energy Commission. My portion of the presentation is going to focus on the updated analysis, newly enacted legislation, and the recommendation and alternatives for the state's remaining gas-fired OTC units in California's ISO Balancing Authority area. Luam Tesfaye from the CPUC will be covering in greater detail information about CPUC procurement and impacts they are experiencing. This slide shows an overview of events that occurred earlier this year after the March 2022 SACWIS report was adopted. In May 2022, the CEC hosted its annual reliability workshop. The CEC conducted analysis in collaboration with CPUC and CAISO focused on the summers of 2022 and 2025. The analysis revealed that up to 10,000 megawatts of additional capacity could be needed in the future during times of multiple extreme events or coinciding extreme events. The joint agency analysis in part informed the governor of the proposed strategic reliability reserve to support grid reliability through 2026. The reserve was enacted with the passage and signing of AB 205 in June 2022, which required DWR to manage emergency resources for use in extreme events. The resources may include extending the operations of power plants currently scheduled for retirement, such as OTC plants. Next slide, please. In determining impacts and capacity needs, we consider our standard practice to plan procurement of resources to meet a 1 in 10 planning standard, which is to say no more than 1 day with an outage in 10 years. Resource procurement is based on the CEC's demand forecast. The CEC publishes the main forecast every other year in January with an update in interim years. Capacity shown here in darker blue was based on the last year's CPUC procurement processes using the CEC's most up-to-date forecast at the time for 2021. The CEC's interim demand forecast in January 2022 forecasted demand to be higher than previously projected, so that incremental demand is not covered in the procurement order that would be considered necessary to meet a 1 in 10 standard. In the chart that is called potential lag in procurement, this is represented by the blue above the black line. The 1 in 10 standard does not take into account non-standard factors such as supply chain impacts to project development or extreme events such as major heat waves, drought, or wildfire impacts. Combinations of these factors have the potential to greatly impact our supply of electricity. Next slide, please. This slide is an estimation of megawatts based on the bar chart we just discussed. We estimate that the updated demand forecast for expected procurement based on 1 in 10 planning standard is 1,700 megawatts lower than predicted last year, and for 2025, potentially 1,800 megawatts lower. Extreme weather impacts could add an additional 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts, and project delays from various supply chain issues could range anywhere from 600 to 3,800 megawatts. Instances of coincidental event situations could require 7,000 to 10,000 megawatts of additional resources above procurement requirements. Recognizing the potential reliability risks, the governor proposed in May revised to establish a strategic electricity reliability reserve. I will discuss the reserve more shortly, but first we'll turn to Luam, who will talk about resources coming online.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. So good morning, Water Board members. My name is Luam Tesfaye, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Energy and Climate Policy at the California Public Utilities Commission, and I represent the CPUC on the SACWIS. So the CPUC oversees about 90% of electrical load within the CAISO balancing area. And the CAISO area in turn represents about 80% of California's load. Load-serving entities within the CAISO that are under the CPUC's jurisdiction include the investor-owned utilities, the community choice aggregators or CCAs, and the direct access entities that provide energy directly to some large commercial and industrial customers. Through the integrated resource planning proceeding, a public stakeholder process at the CPUC, we assess whether there are enough resources within the CAISO to meet future demand using the industry standard of no more than one loss of load event in every 10 years. If the CPUC determines that additional resources are needed within the CAISO, it orders the load serving entities under its jurisdiction to procure their pro rata share of additional resources to provide that level of reliability. In our integrated resource planning orders, the CPUC takes into consideration what resources are needed to meet the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. Since 2019, the CPUC ordered an additional 14,800 megawatts in net qualifying capacity of additional procurement in the IRP proceeding to be procured by June 1st, 2026. Net qualifying capacity, as opposed to just the nameplate value, refers to the actual reliability value that the CPUC's modeling determines that each type of resource, so wind, solar, et cetera, can provide, which varies depending on the type of resource and the amount of that resource that is already on the grid. For instance, given the large amount of solar that is already on the grid, the CPUC's load-serving entities receive very little credit towards their IRP requirements for standalone solar resources. And then also, given this large amount of solar already on the grid, adding more standalone solar provides very little additional reliability value versus a resource like solar paired with energy storage. All of the megawatt values on this slide refer to net qualifying capacity values. And so, as I noted earlier, the CPUC identifies the total need in the CAISO, but only orders procurement of that need for the 90% share of the CAISO grid that is represented by our CPUC jurisdictional load serving entities. And the CPUC has minimal visibility into whether similar levels of new procurement are being pursued by the other 10% of the CAISO load, which is comprised by the publicly owned utilities. And so, looking at this chart here, the top row of the table on the slide summarizes the procurement orders in the CPUC decision from 2019, November of 2019. This decision required the CPUC's jurisdictional load-serving entities to collectively procure an additional 3,300 megawatts of new resources by August 1st of 2023 to address an immediate reliability concern. The second row of the table summarizes the procurement ordered in a CPUC decision from 2021, which required 11,500 megawatts of additional new resources to address what we call midterm reliability needs, and that's the 2023 to the 2026 timeframe. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to go into a bit more of the new procurement challenges. So the CPUC, the CEC, CAISO, as well as GoBiz have been tracking the progress on these ordered procurements, identifying barriers that are slowing project development down and helping to troubleshoot and remove those barriers through what we call the Tracking Energy Development Task Force, commonly referred to as the TED Task Force. And so, but despite these efforts, we are still concerned that not all of the new resources ordered by the CPUC will come online within the required timeframes that I outlined earlier. So far, the 2021 and 2022 procurement requirements have been met. And barring any new challenges, we're optimistic that the resources ordered for 2023 will be brought online in the next year. However, not all of the 7,500 megawatts required in 2024 and 2025 are under contract yet. And it may be difficult to contract with sufficient viable resources. And then in addition, load-serving entities are expected to face significant challenges in bringing on the 2,000 megawatts of what we call long lead time resources ordered for 2026. Those might be offshore wind, that might be long duration storage, geothermal, et cetera. And so getting into some of the risks, projects have faced really three main challenges. First, supply chain disruptions have affected the build out of solar and storage projects that collectively represent the large majority of anticipated procurement. These disruptions have come from tight lithium supply and the resulting extreme price volatility, which may be causing some counterparty reluctance to lock in contract pricing at this time. In addition to that, China's previous zero COVID policies really shut down the manufacturing of batteries in China. And then that also led to bottlenecks in getting resources onto ships, congestion at our ports, and the availability of ancillary project components besides the batteries and the solar panels themselves. For solar or hybrid solar and storage projects, there's also the ongoing Department of Commerce investigation into solar tariff circumvention complaints that added another challenge. Though we've received some preliminary determinations earlier this month on that investigation from the federal administration is still ongoing. So I'd like to wrap up by talking about some of the interconnection and transmission development to support new projects that have been facing challenges. So interconnection is a project-specific process that requires intensive construction and engineering coordination between project developers and utilities. The unprecedented number of new generation projects and the amount of generation and storage that load-serving entities are bringing online has strained this process and may lead to some projects being delayed. The fact that all of this new transmission and interconnection work is occurring at the same time has caused the California utilities to be laser focused on hardening their transmission and distribution grids for resilience as well. And that creates additional challenges in terms of competing for scarce skills, expertise, and labor. And so finally, some of these projects have faced issues acquiring permits from local jurisdictions as well, who are understandably cautious about permitting new battery storage facilities as they develop familiarity with new storage technologies and the best available safety and fire suppression practices. So that wraps up my slides, and I'll turn it back to Ms. Gutierrez. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And as we transition, I just want to note, I know we have a number of hands up on the Zoom platform. We'll take comments after the presentation and discussion. And so if you're looking to comment, no need to have your hand raised. If you're having an issue on the platform, please do email commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov, and the clerk can help you with any technical issues you may be having. But we'll be taking comments after the presentations. So thank you.
Slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the governor's May revised budget proposed the development of several efforts to provide additional reliability support for our state. These are included in AB 205. The first and largest is the Strategic Electricity Reliability Reserve, which may have up to 5,000 megawatts of additional resources of varying types. There is $2.4 billion allocated to the strategic reliability infrastructure assets, whereby DWR will procure new assets such as backup generators and storage. The reserve also allows DWR to contract with existing power plants slated for retirement, such as the remaining OTC plants. On November 30th, the CEC, CPUC, and CAISO members submitted a letter to the State Water Resources Control Board to clarify that the recommendation of SACWIS is contingent upon the OTC plants being part of the Strategic Reliability Reserve to support the grid in extreme events, and to clarify that these resources would not serve as resource adequacy resources. Also, DWR may purchase power purchase agreements to bring more resources into the state, such as additional imports. These resources will be used during extreme events. Any OTC power plant extensions will only be used in the strategic reserve, as I mentioned. Additional reserve resources, including funding for the Distributed Electricity Backup Assets Program, which will set up an incentive program to deploy new zero or low emission backup at existing facilities. And funding towards demand side grid support program. This builds on last year's California State Emergency Program to provide additional demand reductions during the net peak. Next slide. We looked at three alternatives. The first, which is our recommended alternative and was adopted by the SACWIS on September 30th, is to extend Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach for 3 years through the end of 2026. These resources would be in the strategic reserve for emergency use. Note that DWR would be contracting for these OTC units operation to support times of extreme emergency events, and they would not be available to load serving entities for resource adequacy. The second alternative would include Redondo Beach, which would have provided more resources to DWR for contracting, but was not recommended due to possible land use challenges. The third option was to keep the existing retirement schedule. This was not selected because of the need for additional resources to provide grid reliability. Next slide. On September 30th, the SACWIS adopted the updated report and recommended to extend Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach for 3 years through the end of 2026. These resources would be included in the DWR Strategic Reserve. Other factors we considered were that Alamitos and Huntington Beach both have existing co-located non-OTC units that will continue operating regardless of the planned OTC retirement. And Redondo's units may have possible land use challenges. And Ormond Beach operators, Genon and the city of Oxnard, may extend their current MOU to collect funds for dismantling the plant after its closure. Next, I will turn it over to my colleagues to cover the remaining slides.
The special SACWIS report also detailed a request from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power to extend the OTC policy compliance date for Scattergood Generating Station Units 1 and 2 for 5 years. For background, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which I'll also be calling the LADWP, approved the Local Capacity Technical Report on December 14th, 2021. This report contained details regarding local grid reliability issues and recommended requesting an OTC policy compliance date extension to the State Water Resources Control Board. On February 3rd, 2022, the LADWP submitted a request letter to the State Water Board to extend Scattergood's OTC policy compliance date from December 31st, 2024 to December 31st, 2029. This request would place Scattergood's OTC policy compliance date in line with the existing compliance dates for the other OTC power plants under LADWP's jurisdiction. The LADWP indicated that this request is needed to support local grid reliability while they transition to a 100% carbon-free grid, which is required by the Green New Deal. Next slide. The special SACWIS report also contained alternatives for the SACWIS's consideration regarding Scattergood Generating Station, which is in the LADWP's Balancing Authority area. Alternative B1 recommends that the SACWIS support the request from the LADWP to extend the OTC policy compliance date for Scattergood for 5 years, from December 31st, 2024 to December 31st, 2029, to support local reliability. Alternative B2 would recommend that the SACWIS oppose the request from the LADWP to extend Scattergood's compliance date. Based on the information submitted to the SACWIS by the LADWP to date, the SACWIS has found no reason to object to the LADWP's request. We will be hearing additional information from the LADWP following this presentation. Next slide. On September 30th, 2022, the SACWIS recommended alternative B1 in the special SACWIS report, which recommended that the SACWIS support the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's request to the State Water Board to extend the OTC policy compliance date of Scattergood Units 1 and 2 for 5 years. And that is again from December 31st, 2024 to December 31st, 2029 to support local grid reliability. Next slide. Staff is currently preparing a draft staff report for the proposed amendment, which will be released for public comment on or before January 31st, 2023. Following a public hearing on March 7th, 2023, and the close of the public comment period, staff will prepare responses to comments and revise the draft staff report as needed and appropriate, and will release these documents in July of 2023. Staff anticipate bringing these items before the State Water Board for consideration of adoption in late summer of 2023. Next slide. In the next few slides, I will discuss water quality considerations associated with the SACWIS's recommendation, followed by comments from the California Air Resources Control Board regarding air quality considerations. Next. This graph, which is included in the special SACWIS report, shows historic and projected water use for all OTC power plants as a daily average in millions of gallons per day. Water use is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. The daily average water use decreases over time as power plants have come into compliance with the OTC policy. The blue line represents design flow rates based on the current compliance schedule in the OTC policy, and the red line represents actual flow data reported by facilities to the US EPA. The dashed red line projects flow rates through 2026. As shown in this figure, the projected fleet water use is still below design flow rates from the policy's compliance schedule. The projected fleet water use may slightly exceed the 2010 State Water Board's compliance schedule. Note that the dashed blue line shows design flow rates based on the OTC policy compliance date extensions included in the special SACWIS report. If the compliance dates for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, Ormond Beach, and Scattergood generating stations are extended, we would still be on track to meet the original intended flow reduction in the OTC policy. Also note that this graph does not reflect the recent extension of Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant's operations through 2030, as approved by the state legislature through State Bill 846, Senate Bill 846. Next slide. Based on the recommendations of the SACWIS, staff is preparing a proposed amendment to the OTC policy to extend the compliance date for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach generating stations for 3 years through December 31st, 2026, and to extend the compliance date for Scattergood generating station for 5 years through December 31st, 2029. Office of Administrative Law approval would have to occur by December 31st, 2023 for Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach generating stations to remain in compliance with the OTC policy. Next. Regarding water quality impacts of the proposed amendment, there are several water quality regulatory impacts to consider. Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach have National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permits that expire on December 31st, 2025. The permittees may submit applications and reports of waste discharge to renew these permits 180 days prior to their expiration. Applicable to OTC discharges, Alamitos has a time schedule order with interim effluent limitations for the following constituents: temperature, total residual chlorine, copper, nickel, bis-2-ethylhexyl phthalate associated with PVC plastics, and Enterococcus, a fecal indicator bacteria type. The TSO and interim effluent limitations will expire on December 31st, 2023 to match the facility's current OTC compliance date. It should be noted that OTC discharges account for 99% of the facility's total discharge. Alamitos' original plan for complying with the TSO was to cease the use of OTC waters by the end of 2020, based on its original OTC policy compliance date. Following the extension of the OTC policy compliance date to the end of 2023, the Los Angeles Regional Water Board renewed the TSO through December 31st, 2023 to match its new compliance date. AES Alamitos' plan for complying with the TSO remains the cessation of OTC water usage by the facility's new compliance date. And moving forward, staff is aware of several issues that may be a challenge to further renewing the TSO, should Alamitos' compliance date be extended to the end of 2026, based on the recommendations of the SACWIS. Because the TSO was originally adopted on September 10th, 2015, the TSO could only be renewed through September 10th, 2025, due to the 10-year time limit on time schedule orders. Any discharge after that date until the end of 2026 would need to meet final effluent limitations, which the facility currently cannot attain, or be subject to mandatory minimum penalties. Los Angeles Regional Water Board staff has indicated that they expect exceedances of the final effluent limitations when the facility operates after the time schedule order expires, primarily associated with temperature from thermal discharges that are a byproduct of OTC power generation. Because the facility withdraws its OTC water from Los Cerritos Channel and discharges to a separate water body, the San Gabriel River estuary, Alamitos must address pollutant concentrations in their discharge that could be coming from their source water from Los Cerritos Channel without getting intake credits like other OTC facilities with an existing TSO. In order to propose an extension of the TSO from 2023 to 2025, Los Angeles Regional Water Board and State Water Board staff need to consider actions and milestones that would lead to compliance with the effluent limits listed in Alamitos' waste discharge order. However, AES has already completed several significant tasks. AES permanently shut down OTC units, Alamitos OTC units 1, 2, and 6 on December 31st, 2019. AES also constructed 2 dry-cooled natural gas-fired combined cycle gas turbines with a combined output of 650 megawatts that began commercial operation on February 6, 2020. Additionally, AES constructed a 100 megawatt battery energy storage system that began commercial operation in January 2021. The remaining task is to cease the discharge of OTC water from the facility by permanently shutting down the remaining OTC units, 3, 4, and 5. Los Angeles Regional Water Board and State Water Board staff will coordinate to discuss implications of the proposed extension, appropriateness of continued discharges of elevated temperature and other wastes, and the facility's ability to comply with its effluent limitations. Finally, it should be noted that Scattergood Generating Station has an NPDES permit that was administratively extended by the Los Angeles Regional Water Board on March 18th, 2021, after receiving a report of waste discharge from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. The terms and actions of this order continue to be in full effect, pending action on a new or revised permit. Next. And I will now pass it to my colleague from the California Air Resources Board, who is attending virtually.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning. I'm Stephanie Cotto, Staff Air Pollution Specialist in the Industrial Strategies Division at the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, and I'm also on the interagency staff group that supports the SACWIS. CARB staff's air quality review with respect to proposed extensions of OTC generating units involves coordination with the local air districts to identify requirements that need to be met related to permitting, as well as identify provisions in current or anticipated future rulemaking proceedings that may have a bearing on operations in the context of the OTC compliance date extension proposals. With respect to permitting requirements, the OTC units at Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach currently have valid Title V permits, but will need to apply for and follow the Title V permit renewal process for operation through 2026. The units may continue operating in accordance with their permits, including meeting future applicable regulatory requirements. In terms of rulemaking that could affect the OTC plants, Rule 1135 amendments and new Rule 429.2 that were adopted early this year by the South Coast Air District cover NOx emission, best available retrofit control technology standards, and provisions related to limiting emissions during startup and shutdown. In consideration of retirement plans, these rules allow limited term exemptions through December 31, 2029 for OTC units that will retire by their OTC policy compliance dates. The South Coast Air District is also in the process of amending their new source review rules as part of the transition from their market-based reclaim program to command and control rules. District staff has conveyed there may be changes to how emission offsets are calculated per guidance from the US EPA. These changes may impact the amount of offsets required for future projects involving replacement of OTC units, but should not impact the availability of those offsets. With respect to Scattergood, operation through 2029 will require that the facility apply to renew its Title V permit in accordance with South Coast Air District permitting procedures and timelines. CARB staff had abstained from weighing in on the request to extend the scattergood compliance date at the SACWIS meeting because we needed more time to evaluate the request. As of today, that evaluation is still in process. And now I'll turn it back to Jonathan.
Great. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. So we will now open the floor to board member questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the detailed presentation and discussion. And just looking to fellow board colleagues, if there's any questions off the bat, I know we have a number of commenters and can go to them if there aren't any questions. Okay, and seeing none from our colleagues on Zoom either. So let's go ahead and begin to hear from our commenters. Our first commenter will be Mark Miller, followed by Scott Wetch.
Apologies, Chair
yes.
Esquivel. Do we want to hear the presentation from LADWP before we
apologies.
go to public
Yes,
comment?
didn't mean to transition so quickly. Yes, let's hear from LADWP as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and sorry to just try to gloss right through. You may need to turn on the microphone there.
No problem. Thank
Good morning.
you, Chair Esquivel. Good morning, and good morning to the board and also everyone else here in the room with us. We just wanted to tell you and how thankful we are with your staff working with us these past couple of years, I think now, and they've just been really great. And so we wanted to let you know that. Today we have 3 presenters. I have here Glenn Berry, who is the Assistant Director of Power Operations. We have also Jason Rondeau. Jason, what's your title now?
Just planning.
Okay. Jason Rondeau is now the Director of Planning, and you have myself, Director of Environmental Affairs. So with that, we're going to need probably about 5 to 10 minutes, if that's okay.
More than fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll start with Glenn Berry.
Good morning, board members. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, we'll go a little bit of past the information here. On February of 2019, the LA Mayor, Eric Garcetti, announced that LA will not continue with repowers of its generating stations to help address climate change, focusing on a path forward to being carbon free. This essentially stopped scattergood units 1 and 2 from being repowered and getting off of once-through cooling. In order to maintain a sustainable path forward, as well as maintaining grid reliability, the additional 5 years that we're asking for to reach compliance for scattergood generating stations, units 1 and 2, is vital for reliability. Next slide. All right, quick overview of our system. We have 3 coastal plants that are critical to reliability and managing transmission flows on the system, one of those being scattergood generating station. We own our own distribution, transmission, and generation. We are also one of about 8 balancing authorities in California. Next slide. The conclusions of our local capacity technical report showed approximately 250 megawatt deficit on the west side of the transmission system if units 1 and 2 are retired in 2024. Again, significant risk to reliability. Projects in that report were identified to increase transmission and allow reliable operation with the units. These projects, mainly the Tarzana to Olympic and Toluca to Hollywood transmission paths, will need until 2029 to be completed. These upgrades take time, and they're constrained not only by the time of year that you do them, since you can't do them in the summer when you have high loads on the system, but also cannot do multiple outages at the same time during the winter. Without the 2 main transmission projects being completed and without scattergood 1 and 2, there's a high risk for significant load shedding, or more commonly known as blackouts. Next slide. All right, this slide shows the times over the last 3 years since 2020 that the California ISO has declared either a restricted maintenance operations day, a transmission emergency or an energy emergency alert. And on those days, what LADWP exported to them to help the state. Total megawatts over this period was over 37,000 that were delivered. And scattergrid units 1 and 2 during that same period supplied 48,000 megawatt hours into our system. Based on that, you can see without scattergrid units 1 and 2, LA's ability to help the state on these higher load days would certainly have been less. Next slide. All right, units 1 and 2, again, critical to the DWP system, and they are absolutely necessary for the high load strain periods, such as heat storms and other operational conditions. Their capacity factor only averages about 5%, but if they are not there when needed, there can be serious grid reliability issues, including the need to shed load or have power outages. On the grid on the bottom left, you can see units 1 and 2 have not been ordered on in the last 3 years for economical purposes. They are only brought on for either reliability purposes or for regulatory testing requirements. You can see about 85% of the time was reliability. The other 15% was required testing that must be done for compliance purposes. And in the bottom lower right, you can see we had at least one of those units on 30% of the time. It means 30% of the time they were on for reliability purposes, maintaining the grid reliability. Next slide. This just shows a graphical that as the loads increase, the units are used more often, again, for reliability purposes on those higher load days. Next slide. You can move on to the next slide. It's just another trend of the same thing. Next slide, sorry. Okay, scattergrid units 1 and 2, again, any load on the west side subsystem greater than 640 megawatts must be locally generated to maintain grid reliability that's required for the standards. That's due to transmission limitations. Our west side load ranges from about 575 megawatts up to about 1,000 megawatts on heavy load days. Between 2017 and 2021, we had between 61 and 110 days per year on average that were above that 640 megawatt transmission threshold. We did an actual case study of one of our recent high load days from this summer, September 6, 2022. And what it showed was that the loss of one west side transmission line, if our largest scattergrid unit was not available, would result in emergency overloads on the remaining transmission system without units 1 or 2 online. And for just reference, the largest unit at scattergrid has been not available on average about 21% of the time over the last 3 years. So it is not available at some amount of time. What we saw was about 100 megawatts of generation during this very realistic scenario on September 6 is needed to avoid load shedding and implementing rolling blackouts on the west side. The next slide. Our 2022 strategic long-term resource plan took a closer look at the resource adequacy, and as expected, we see a shortfall in the future. I think that was talked about earlier by others. That's even with scattergrid units 1 and 2 online. So in the late afternoon, early evening in the August and September months when solar generation drops off, but the load does not. All right, we'll go to the next slide and I'll turn it over to Jason Rondeau.
All right, Jason Rondeau, Director of Resource Planning, Development and Programs. And I'd like to just share how scattergrid extension fits into our broader renewable efforts as well. The LA100 study was a study that we conducted a number of years ago, began a number of years ago, and actually finished last year. It was a groundbreaking study that was a partnership with the Department of Energy, National Renewable Energy Lab, to look at what are the ways that we can get to 100% renewable energy, what are the investments that we need to make, and what are the outcomes. And on the next slide, you can see from a very high level, all of the investments. On the next slide, you'll be able to see all the investments that we need to make. Could we go to the next slide? Thanks. All the investments that we need to make to get to 100% renewable energy. I'll just point out a couple of these that are extraordinarily relevant to our discussion today. Of course, we need to have more renewable energy, and we have to actually double all the capacity that LADWP has today. So all the storage, the solar, the remaining gas and coal that will be decommissioned in a couple of years, we have to double all of those resources over the next 20 years. But we also have to have a significant transmission build out. And the study also found that under any pathway to 100% renewable energy, we actually have to have local in-basin within the city or near the city of Los Angeles combustion in the form of either biofuels or green hydrogen. We did try to model scenarios that did not include that, and we were not able to have a resilient and reliable power system in the future based on that criteria. On the next slide, you can see this just shows 10 transmission projects. We have dozens of transmission projects that we need to complete over the next 10 years. But these are local in-basin City of Los Angeles transmission projects that we need to do to not just get power to the city, but to the parts of the city that need it. Scattergood extension for units 1 and 2 and the future capacity at Scattergood are very important for this because as we call for outages on those transmission lines, we need to have that resource there available, even if it's not operating, available to be able to provide power in the event that there is an unplanned outage at the same time we're doing planned outages. On the next slide, it summarizes what our sort of long-term plan is post Scattergood units 1 and 2. We recently had our Board of Commissioners approve a project for a green hydrogen capacity at Scattergood, and it's gone through the first of 2 stages of council approval as well. And we expect to have that completed by the end of the decade, and that will replace the need for Scattergood 1 and 2, the existing units now today. On the next slide, you can see the relationship. I just talked about this, so I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next and I believe final slide. To just emphasize the work that we're all doing outside of Scattergood 1 and 2 in the future replacement capacity, we have invested billions and billions of dollars in distributed resources. We continue to do that. I won't summarize all of these here, but the intent is to show that this is a vital piece of our future. We have to do it, but they do not replace the resiliency value that Scattergood 1 and 2 and the future Scattergood capacity will have. They are absolutely vital, but they are not a replacement for that. On the next slide, this kind of re-summarizes all the different tracks that we're making investment on. The intent here is just to show that we're not waiting. We are continuing to make investments across all of the areas that we need to make to achieve our renewable goals. And I believe, Catherine, you might have the next slide.
I have 45 seconds.
Yeah, this is really quick. All of our power planning scenarios in the future, 0 carbon by 2035, if I didn't say that already. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And don't worry too much about the timer. You guys have enough time to complete what you need. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Catherine Rubin, Director of Environmental Affairs. Next slide. So LADWP fully supports, as you know, the regulations to minimize any negative impacts to marine life with our cooling water structure. And just to let you know that, over the years, we've eliminated 14 of our OTC units down to 6. We've had a 56% reduction overall in our flows. At Scattergood specifically, we put in a velocity cap, which decreased impingement mortality by 97%. We did a study under the help of Jonathan Bishop back when. And we also eliminated our flow at our largest unit, Unit 3, which decreased that flow there at Scattergood by 55%. And we're happy to say that when we did take that unit offline, we've had no mammal intakes there since 2015. We've opted to completely eliminate the use of once-through cooling. And since October 1st, 2015, we've also been paying the interim mitigation fee to cover any impacts based on our actual flow. Next slide. Here's a graph to just show what happened back when we took Unit 3 offline. You can see that our impingement impacts became de minimis. We had a slight blurb there in 2019. It was apparently a large school of anchovies came in, but that was an anomaly and doesn't normally happen. Next slide. We also want to just point out that we're committed to supporting and providing additional funding to any of the local coastal projects above and beyond the interim mitigation fee required per the OTC policy. And we continue to work with the NGOs to figure out what that voluntary environmental benefits will look like. and to find an agency that will help us manage the money for that. Next slide. So in conclusion, as you heard from Glenn about our shortage, the dire need for scattergrid units 1 and 2, they're absolutely necessary for the stress periods. They only operate on an average of 30% of the year. And it also provides flexibility to supplement power to the CalISO grid during those very stress periods, as happened this past year and years before. So by extending our deadline, it allows us to maintain our grid reliability and our resiliency on our grid. We're going to be addressing and mitigating climate change with our pathway to 100% carbon free. And we continue to minimize any impingement mortality and entrainment impacts due to our OTC units. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you for letting us go over a few minutes. We appreciate it, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Easily. And thank you for traveling up and the presentation on the item. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I see a number of hands up. I won't start taking folks out of order because we'll just quickly try to be sure we get to everyone, and appreciate everyone's patience. So we'll take folks in order of received, and the first commenter will be Mark Miller, followed by Scott Wetch, and then Sean Silva.
Good morning, Chair, board members. My name is Mark Miller. I am the AES California Market Business Leader and General Manager for AES's Southland facilities, which includes the Alamitos Generating Station and Huntington Beach Generating Station. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. The draft 2022 special report of the Statewide Advisory Committee on Cooling Water Intake Structures, or SACWIS, includes Alternative A1, which recommends that the State Water Resource Control Board consider and amend the once-through cooling policy compliance dates for 3 facilities, which include the Alamitos Generating Station and the Huntington Beach Generating Station, through December 31st, 2026, to support electric system reliability needs. If this approach is adopted, AES is prepared to continue operating the Alamitos Generating Station and Huntington Beach Generating Station as recommended by the SACWIS. Our facilities have demonstrated they are ready and available to support California's grid reliability needs. AES continues to invest significant capital to ensure that our facilities are maintained in a state of readiness to serve local and system reliability needs. The Alamitos and Huntington Beach facilities have helped keep the lights on during rolling blackouts in 2020 and again during stress periods in 2021. This year, in September of 2022, all units at the Alamitos and Huntington Beach facilities supported the critical peak hours during the extensive 10-day heat wave period. We are prepared to continue supporting California's energy needs during such critical times. We support the adoption of the draft 2022 special report and Alternative A1. I'm available to answer any questions that the board might have. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Next, I'd like to call up Scott Wetch and Sean Silva, and who will be followed by Omar Galindo. Good morning.
Hello, good afternoon or good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Scott Wetch. I'm here today representing the 100,000 members of the State Association of Electrical Workers, the 50,000 members of the California Coalition of Utility Employees, and the 30,000 members of the California State Pipe Trades Council. We strongly urge the board to support Alternative A1 contained in the SACWIS draft 2022 special report, extending the compliance dates for 3 facilities, Huntington Beach, Alamitos, and Ormont, as well as Alternative B1 to extend Scattergood Generating Station. These 4 facilities are absolutely essential to maintaining local and state system reliability. One only needs to look at the critical role they played during the rolling blackouts in 2020 and the stress periods of 2021 to recognize the critical backup role they play. Moreover, as we learned in 2019 during the Saddle Ridge fire, the 2 major transmission corridors serving the LA basin are incredibly vulnerable to wildfire events. These 4 facilities saved Los Angeles from a catastrophic outage lasting not days, but perhaps weeks. Consequently, the aforementioned organizations urge the board to support SACWIS's alternative A1 and B1. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you as well. Appreciate your participation and comments. Next is Sean Silva, who will be followed by Omar Galindo and followed by Annalisa Mo.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Morning. Hi, my name is Sean Silva, and I'm speaking on behalf of CREED LA today. CREED is a community group whose mission is to advance sustainable development throughout the Los Angeles region. We are committed to a safer environment and a more inclusive development landscape. And I'm calling in to express CREED's view that the State Advisory Committee's recommendation to extend operations for the Alamitos Generation Station and Huntington Beach Generating Station is the right decision. Equitable development and our day-to-day life in the region depend upon a stable and consistent energy grid. California needs grid reliability now more than ever. We know these facilities help keep on the lights throughout the Southland through some pretty tough moments. We aren't ready to transition away from them yet. So let's keep them online instead. This is a very serious matter, and we should treat it that way. We fully support the recommendation to extend their operational lifespan, and we hope you keep this state and region functioning at the highest levels of efficiency and output possible, for it is in all of our best interests. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Appreciate your time and participation in today's informational item. Next, I'd like to call up Omar Galindo, who will be followed by Annalisa Mo and then Nella Cook.
Good morning. My name is Omar Galindo. I am a member of UA Plumbers Local 78, speaking on behalf of 2,000 plus members in the Los Angeles area. As a member of the skilled trades, I know that we have an extraordinary challenge before us to bring the right amount of energy to millions of Southern Californians through a grid that can always be more robust. During the historic heat wave in September of this year, the generating facilities being considered for an extension help support our local energy needs. Keeping these facilities running helps keep our lights on during rolling blackouts, our AC cool during the brutal summers, and our homes warm during the winter months. Keeping them open and operational is future-proofing our energy grid. We fully support the adoption of the report that recommends an extension to ensure reliable energy year-round. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Galindo. Appreciate your time today and your comments. Next, I'd like to call up Annalisa Mo and then Nella Cook, and then followed by Miguel Vega.
Thank you so much, and good morning, board members. I apologize for any background noise. There's some construction happening in my building today. But for the record, my name is Annalisa Mo, and I'm speaking on behalf of Heal the Bay. We are a nonprofit based in Santa Monica dedicated to making the coastal waters and watersheds of greater LA safe, healthy, and clean. Heal the Bay was actively engaged in the development of the once through cooling policy and has continued to engage in the implementation of the policy and local plans to transition away from once through cooling power generation. I don't need to tell you all that once through cooling causes significant ongoing devastation to our valuable marine and coastal ecosystems and their inhabitants. The impacts of using an arcane energy technology on our nation's fisheries has been devastating. We appreciate the State Water Board's efforts to minimize marine life mortality associated with coastal power plants through the once through cooling policy. I'd like to make a note very quickly that as we transition to renewable energy sources in Los Angeles County and throughout the state of California, we definitely understand the need for grid reliability, particularly during times of peak energy demand. However, we must also consider the impacts of allowing once through cooling operations to continue beyond the original deadlines from the once through cooling policy. It is imperative that we transition away from this harmful operation, but as we do so, we must also ensure that we're transitioning towards the most responsible, sustainable practices so that we do not simply transition from one harmful operation to another. I'll give an example here with one that we've been in conversation with LADWP about, which is the extension proposed for the Scattergood facility. And the only remaining concern that we have is the associated transition that is proposed to transition to green hydrogen. Now for Heal the Bay, we are still somewhat concerned about the huge water demand that green hydrogen in particular will create. And as the climate crisis continues and as the board struggles with water supply issues, and facing the impacts of aridification in Southern California, creating new and high demand for water is irresponsible. So we have to explore the most creative strategies to transition away from fossil fuels and once through cooling operations and towards options that are more sustainable and protective of community health as well as environmental health. Specifically, we do need to see a full analysis of impacts from continued once through cooling operation beyond the original deadlines, a full analysis of the impacts of green hydrogen as a future option, and a full analysis of alternatives that are 100% renewable, sustainable, and combustion-free, not just carbon-free, which would exclude green hydrogen. We therefore would like to see once through cooling facilities transition or close as originally required under the once through cooling policy, or at least as soon as possible if we're not able to meet those original deadlines, and can only support extension potentially if it is truly for the greater good to transition to a future with as few emissions as possible. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment and for your time. I'll be around if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mo. Really appreciate your comments and contribution to the discussion here. I'll note, I think we have a few folks that are entering the Zoom platform without having gone through our web form. So we're not sure which item you're looking to comment on. We're going to get through the folks that did come in through the web form. And then at the end, we'll ask you to raise your hand if you wish to further speak on this item and identify yourself at that point. So just for folks on the platform. Next, I'd like to call up Mela Cook, who will be followed by Miguel Vega, and then Pastor Zach.
Good morning. My name is Mila. I'm with Anchor Church. We support the findings of the 2022 Special SACWIS report. Often it's the most vulnerable people who are impacted when power outages take place. Food that spoils is easily replaced when you're on It's not easily replaced when you're on a fixed income or a limited income. Those who are on oxygen machines are struggling to afford 24-hour caregivers are put into potential dangerous situations when they are challenged to locate additional resources and support when they struggle to even communicate with their providers. And those who are pregnant or nursing and taking care of their young children, particularly young mothers that are single, are at a particular disadvantage when the blackouts occur. When people receive the Holy Spirit, their eyes are completely opened to the needs of those who are hurting and disadvantaged. And those who are committed in ministry in the Church of Jesus Christ recognize the decisions that are made by political bodies such as these can have a very real retrospect and marginalized communities. It is for these reasons that we sincerely and humbly ask that you allow the recommended extension of the completion date to support the grid reliability. Thank you. God bless you. Merry Christmas to you all and your families.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Really appreciate your time, participation, and comments in today's informational item. Next, I'd like to call up Miguel Vega, who will be followed by Pastor Zach.
Good morning. My name is Miguel Vega. I'm with Anchor Church, and we are in favor of the extension of the compliance dates. Me and everyone born in the heart of the city of LA have grown up knowing that if you want something, if it really matters to you, you're going to have to fight for it. Very few things in this life just fall into your lap. However, when I came to Christ, I learned how to have faith. I learned to pray for certain things and God will deliver. And yet that doesn't mean that we as believers just sit back and do nothing when we have a need. In fact, there's a scripture that teaches the type of attitude that we as Christians must have. James chapter 2, verse 14 says, "What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions?" Can that kind of faith save anyone? We pray for things like the finances. We need to keep the power on. We thank God for things like air conditioning in the triple-digit heat of LA summers. But coming to these hearings is something I can do myself to make a difference. That being said, we ask that you extend the compliance dates. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Vega. Appreciate your words and your time today in being part of today's informational item. Next, I'd like to call up Pastor Zach and then Joe Griever.
Good morning. My name is Pastor Zach with Anchor Church, and we support the State Advisory Committee's recommendation to extend the compliance dates. Let's look at the details. Alamitos, Huntington Beach, and Ormond Beach have been given 3 years to comply with this recommendation. Scattergood 5. Why would a California state agency make such a recommendation in the midst of an era of vehement ecological activism such as ours? It's wisdom. That's why. Believe it or not, Jesus even taught about foresight regarding community planning relative to construction, albeit the original context of the scripture I'm about to read was ambition to give one's life to follow him. Nonetheless, Luke 14:28-30 reads, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" Clearly, we all want to see the end of brown energy in California and internationally, but we cannot accomplish the task without ambition, that supersedes wisdom. It's going to take time to shore up the grid. If you don't authentically believe that, here's an excerpt from 3 months ago on September 6th from the publication TRT World. Quote, "The hottest day of the heat wave was expected to be Tuesday, and California Governor Gavin Newsom said the risk of power outages was real and immediate." Quoting Governor Newsom, "This heat wave is on track to be both the hottest and longest on record in the state and many parts of the West for the month of September," end quote. Newsom said in a video sent to reporters. Remember, these are real lives that are impacted. And although climate change is desperately needed, although we need to do something on our end, we must not approach it with reckless disregard for human life and total abandon of mitigating measures. The reality is this: any decision that we make here, any decision that we make in the future, must not be with reckless abandon. It must be with careful consideration, thought, and proper mitigation. Thank you so much for your time today. God bless you, and Merry Christmas to you and your families.
Thank you, Pastor Zach. Appreciate your time and comments on the informational item here today. Next, I'd like to call up Joe Griever, who will be followed by Chris Hannon, and then we'll move on to Ariel Whitson.
Thanks. My name is Joe Griever, and I'm speaking on behalf of Los Cerritos Wetlands Land Trust. We're dedicated to protecting and restoring the Los Cerritos wetlands, but that mission is compromised by the operation of 2 large OTC facilities withdrawing cooling water from the wetlands. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on the proposed extensions. We don't think you should approve the extensions without adding some conditions. For background, back in the day, I was Surfriders Foundation staff person responsible for our participation in litigation compelling the US EPA to develop regulations for cooling water. That work resulted in the Riverkeeper decisions on Clean Water Act Section 316B. So when the OTC policy was being developed, we participated in the environmental community comments. There was concern then that the reliance on mitigation was illegal under the Riverkeeper decisions, the timeline for compliance was too long, and that the mitigation fees were too little to accomplish much replacement value. And while we were all part of the effort to establish marine protected areas, we didn't agree that the mitigation fees should be dedicated to the MPA maintenance. But it was a difficult energy transition and the compliance deadline was temporary, so we withheld potential challenges. Today, we're looking at the Energy Agency's 3rd attempt to set a deadline for compliance and this board's 3rd attempt to fully enforce the Clean Water Act. We understand the complexities of electric generation and distribution and the challenges we face in transitioning to more renewable capacity while maintaining reliability. And we appreciate the Energy Agency's efforts. But the Riverkeeper cases are clear that mitigation is not a legal substitute for best available technology. These extensions can't continue without some sidebars to ensure compliance. The energy agencies setting the compliant deadlines again has turned into a pattern, not an exception to the rule. And the state passing legislation that relies on continued operation of the OTC generators only supports the idea that continuing to rely on OTC plants is planned, not an unforeseeable circumstance. But again, we're in a difficult spot. So if the OTC policy compliance has to be amended again, we encourage you to include several changes in that amendment. First, the amended deadline must include a new mitigation formula that fully funds mitigation efforts that result in full replacement value for the marine life destroyed in the ongoing operation of the OTC facilities. Second, in situations where the harm impacts estuarine species, like the AES Alamitos facility, the mitigation fees should be directed to in-kind and in-place restoration. Finally, we think it should be made clear that further delays would be a clear violation of the Clean Water Act and punitive action would be necessary. I want to close by being clear that we fully support the state's effort to transition to a cleaner and reliable electric future. And we recognize that's not an easy task, but the Clean Water Act Section 316B has to be enforced, and our coastal wetlands have to be restored if we want a comprehensive climate mitigation and adaptation plan. So we have to find a way to harmonize all these goals. We hope these suggested amendments will do that. And I'll stick around for questions if you have any. Thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Giever. I appreciate your good comments today and recommendations and engagement in this discussion. Thank you. Next, we go to Chris Hannon, who will be followed by Ariel Whitson.
And Chair Escobar, Mr. Hannon is not on the Zoom platform as best we can tell. However, we do have a couple phone numbers that were not paired to an individual. So Mr. Hannon, if you happen to join via phone, you can press *6 on that phone now, or pardon me, *9 on your phone to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next speaker. It looks like we're good to move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Lawfer. Next, I'd like to call up Ariel Whitson, who will be followed by Martin Marufo.
Hello, my name is Ariel Luila Whitson. I'm the Director of Education and Community at Tree People, an environmental nonprofit. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this item. For almost 50 years, we have been working across Southern California to inspire, engage, and support people to connect with and take action for our environment. Through our education programming, we have worked with youth in Long Beach and the surrounding areas for over 25 years, implementing action-oriented environmental projects. We partner with AES on a community benefits program that supports reducing barriers for low-income communities of color to access transformational opportunities to connect with our precious coasts and watersheds. Our over 35 years of implementing this type of programming has shown us how valuable these experiences are for community members, and our intention is to ensure this programming is long-term, scalable, and replicable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And last, I'd like to call up Martin Marufo.
Good morning. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine, the least. Good morning.
My name is Martin Marufo. I'm with IBEW Local 18, representing the water and power workers in Los Angeles, Pasadena, Glendale, Burbank, and Azusa. I'm also a lifetime resident of Los Angeles. I've lived in Wilmington my whole life. Growing up here, I've also worked in a lot of the places that produce a lot of pollutants. I've worked in the refineries. As a painter, I worked up and down the coast for Southern California Edison as a painter before deregulation. Finally landed at Los Angeles Department of Water and Power as a painter and worked there, and I've worked all the generating stations here in Los Angeles. I've been pretty active in the community, but not very vocal. I've watched from a distance in my capacity as a resident, but as an employee of the Water and Power, also as an employee of Local 18 IBEW, I take a more active role, and I see what is happening around us. I participated in the LA 100 study. I was on that panel and grateful to be there. And I was very thankful that we had Los Angeles Department of Water Power actually being very considerate of the issues that were raised there. And they did make some very major modifications throughout the term of that project. But the outcome here is that we have been stalled by environmental issues in this construction of this facility, and with good intent. And I know there's nobody saying anybody's doing something wrong here. This is absolutely, everybody wants the same thing. But on the other hand, we are here asking for the extension because we were given consideration to the environmental impact. And the once through cooling and the place that we are now, if we do not get this extension, we're going to end up not being able to construct, which means that we will possibly lose our permit to generate, which ends up with us losing significant amount of generation in the basin, which creates a possibility of, in the worst of times, right? Not all the time, but in the worst of times, for us to lose significant power to lesser served communities, which I am a part of. As far as environmental justice, I would much rather have the generating stations produce all the electricity we need to have an electrified transportation, the port of LA, LAWA. I've seen this, and I see that we need to generate some way that is reliable, that is also monitored and very closely regulated, and very low emissions comparatively to a lot of the other polluters out there. This is a matter of me living in this community, growing up in this community, have my children and my grandchildren here, and also it is a huge deal for the workforce in Los Angeles, not just the construction, but the operations and maintenance. So all the infrastructure work that we have coming up, all the work that we have coming regarding the upgrades in Los Angeles, everything from electric car chargers to buses and railways and whatever else we're going to be able to do, it is of the utmost importance that we get this extension and that we find a way to get to hydrogen, green hydrogen. If that is not the path, I mean, that has been the recommendation, but if that is not the path, we still need this generation. So please take in consideration all the things that I brought up, and I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time today and for your comments and engagement in all these issues, Mr. Marufo. Thank you. Next, I do see Furman Olivia on the platform with your hand raised and believe like to comment. So Furman. And then after that, if you are on the phone on the platform, please do hit *9 to raise your hand, and then we can begin to call on you here as well.
So Furman, it looks like you've unmuted and you have the floor at this point.
Good morning. My name is Furman. I'm a lifelong Californian, and I feel it's necessary for me to speak up on this issue. It seems very clear to me that our state's future is on this line, and this is what I mean. We have a power grid that has in recent history been spotty in peak hours and during heat waves when we need it the most. Keeping the facilities in the committee's report operating in the conclusion they came to, and it's obvious choice. Keeping them operational is a safeguard against grid meltdown. It keeps millions of Southern Californians safe from possibly dangerous shortfalls. Everyone I know thinks it's a good call, and I hope we can count on you to support this extension. Thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Oliva. I appreciate your comments today. And we will unmute the phone line with the hand raised as well. And please do introduce yourself. Good morning. And this is the phone number ending in 452.
So if you called in to speak and your phone number ends in 452, we've unmuted you and you've unmuted on your end. So if you speak now, we should be able to hear you on the Zoom platform so the board can take your comment.
All right, good morning. Can you hear me now?
We can. Good morning.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry about that. Hello, my name is John Munoz. I'm a representative of UA Local 250, Steam Fitter Pipe Fitters Union, as well as a resident and a homeowner of Long Beach. As UA Local 250 pipe fitter, I'm familiar with the mechanics involved in creating energy. And let me say we are in need of strong leadership on this issue. We need to protect our state's flow of energy with strong yet reliable grid. The state has faced multiple power outages and the heat waves over the last 3 years. These will continue to happen and will only get worse, especially during peak hours, unless we take action to prioritize the region's energy needs now. The extension of operations at the AES power plant are also critical because they provide economic and employment benefits to Southern Californians who so desperately need them, including the union members that I represent, and we all represent together as tradesmen. Keeping this state and the region's energy capacities functioning at the highest levels and efficiency and output possible in all of our best interests. So we ask you to please approve the staff recommendation. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Appreciate your comments.
And Mr. Munoz, I would appreciate, this is Michael Lawford, Chief Counsel for the board, if you could send an email to the clerk so that we can make sure your name is properly spelled and recorded in the record.
Oh, will do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our commenters.
We do have, I'm sorry,
One
Chair
more.
Esquivel, we
We have
do
one
have
more.
one
It's
more
not the end.
individual who called in and has raised their
I see
hand.
that now.
So
Okay, thank you.
this would be the individual ending in phone number 684. You've been given the opportunity to unmute, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you could please identify yourself, and then like Mr. Munoz, also send an email to the clerk with your full name and so that we can enter it in the record later.
Okay, good morning. My name is Samuel Nieto. I have lived in Southern California my whole life. Only in the last few years have we had a historic heat waves and energy failures like we've had. Outages, brownouts, and even short disruptions are a big deal. I don't have to remind you that they disproportionately impact poor communities and the elderly who have a harder time leaving their homes or taking on financial burden of having to replace damaged medical devices, food, and medication. I strongly urge the board to keep all this in mind and remember the everyday people this decision can impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nieto. I appreciate your comments and your time today. I think that may actually bring us to the end, and I appreciate everyone's time and comments on this informational item. This isn't a decision point for the board yet. Really appreciate everyone's time here and attention to inform us on what, for me, always minded is a balancing decision amongst what are really complex circumstances we all continue to find ourselves in, really critical policies as well, that I have faith that we can all pursue in a way that best balances, again, what are the challenges we're facing. I don't have any further questions right now. It's a lot now. Continue to digest and take this in, and especially as we go to an actual consideration of the amendment, we'll want to follow up on things like ultimately, the formulas being used on mitigation currently. I think it'll be a robust part of this discussion. It's been part of previous adoptions, and I think I'll continue to have some interest in just how we view some of that. So, any colleagues want to leave with any questions or thoughts, please? And as well, Board Member Morgan and Vice Chair, I see you here, but we can go to the in-person couple of folks first, and then or if John has. Mr. Bishop,
Just want to say we are working on reviewing the calculations for the mitigation. They were based on, at the time, what was needed to fully compensate for the impacts, but it's been brought to our attention that it's been a number of years and we should relook at that, and so we are.
Appreciate that, Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, that's great. I think just appreciate that from staff. I know, as you said, we've had
multiple requests for that as we've had to do these extensions the last few years, and there's been limits on that. And so appreciate taking the time and consideration on that. And I also just want to agree with stakeholders that I think the mitigation we'd like to see locally particularly for communities that are disproportionately impacted, including BIPOC communities and those that really, I think, need continued access or improvements in access to recreation and ecosystems, and both in terms of climate resiliency and just quality of life and recreational opportunities in highly urbanized areas. In addition, I think as we look at relooking at the mitigation or considering what could be done, would also just like to get updates from the facilities on what they're doing more specifically as these extensions are going forward. So just thinking about that as we are considering what an order looks like.
Will do.
And then I just really appreciate the thorough and thoughtful analysis here and walking us through that. I appreciate all the really committed work to get us to 100% renewables. Obviously, we're in a climate crisis and appreciate that we're all committed to getting there. And we have to ensure reliability as we do that. And I think there's, consideration of all the alternatives that's really thoughtful. And also, I think, both balancing trying to minimize the time, but also being realistic. I just want to recognize that I think in the last few years, everyone's been trying to minimize the time for facilities, but what that also means is we've had to come back here to do extensions year to year. And that does not just, it gives less certainty to local stakeholders, but it also, frankly, impacts our staff capacity in terms of being able to focus on other really critical ocean plan, climate, climate actions that we need to take, including ocean acidification and other real priorities within the ocean plan that we have. And so I just appreciate that this is a longer term look and sort of balancing that. Again, the minimizing the time that we're doing the extensions, but also really being realistic and a longer term look on what that looks like. But look forward to the order and the work to bring the next steps before us.
Great. Thank you, Board Member. Board Member McGuire.
Yeah, thank you all. I don't have too much more to add on top of that. Good comments there. I just want to thank SACWIZ, thank LADWP, all the commenters today, our staff, for just the really thoughtful remarks and careful consideration of truly embracing reliability, grid reliability and resiliency, and really thinking through what it'll take to get us to where we need to be here to adapt to climate change. And I appreciate the comments about the timeline and just being realistic. I'll be honest, I've been through a couple of once through cooling policy amendments now in my 4 years on the board. And so, I do appreciate how, difficult it is to go through this process and how critical it is that we make smart decisions about our future. I think we heard that loud and clear, I think, from the commenters today as well. So feeling that sense of urgency, about providing, certainty and just a clear understanding of where we're headed here in the coming years. I don't want to put everyone on the spot too much, but I was wondering if there was a sense for the timing on the next steps here with regard to the policy amendment, just recognizing that we're in December 2022, the facilities are currently slated to, the compliance dates are 1 year from now. So there's not a lot of time, but if you could just help, paint a picture of what we should expect in the coming months so the public can understand what might be happening, that would be very
So I'll repeat what was on the slide. We are proposing to put out a staff report I think it was in January of this year. We'll have a comment period, then we'll review the comments, and as soon as we're done with that, we'll put out the final response to comments and hold a board hearing. Combined workshop and hearing. We're going to try and limit it to one to move things along as fast as we can. Our experience is that we get lots of comments. We may or may not this time. So we've had less folks here at the workshop than we've seen in the past. So if we have fewer comments, we'll be able to get through that faster and get to board adoption sooner. And then after we bring it to the board for consideration, assuming you adopt, we would then put the record together and send it to the Office of Administrative Law. They've got 30 working days that they to do that. So we need to get that off to them by September, early October for that to happen before the end of the year. So we have it all scheduled out, and we're doing a little bit better than last year, but in timing, but it's still pretty tight. Just the process takes a while, but we have a very good team that's done this before, and they know what to do. And then when we get the comments in, we recruit other folks to help us with that.
Yeah, hopefully they don't get too much better at it too. Ms. Walsh.
If I may. Yeah, I just have one minor correction to our schedule. We are planning on holding a separate hearing in March, on March 7th during the public comment period. And then, yes, we're anticipating or at least hoping to have OAL approval in early November.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you, board member. Any follow-up? Okay. Looking to Vice Chair and Board Member Morgan in case there's anything further you'd like to plant or make sure that folks are considering as we go to develop the amendment.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
I also do not have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. Okay. I think at this point, then that wraps up this informational item. Again, appreciate everyone's participation, the good presentations and discussion here, and more to come. It's going to be a busy year. So thank you. That wraps up item number 11. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back at 11:15, and we'll start in fresh on our last real item before board member reports. Item number 12, consideration of our proposed emergency regulation readoption for prohibited uses, water conservation. See you guys in 10-ish at 11:15.
Thank you much.
Yeah. It's something, right? Yeah, I used to do that. Right. So at least I used to do that back and forth uphill. DWP doesn't really have anything double doors out. So they're like on the edge of the and then we're just right behind find them, but it's great. So we have to go upstairs until
So they have.
it's true. Yeah. Doesn't seem very far, yeah, but it's actual, yeah. Walking from downtown LA would definitely do that. Exactly. So I'll let you go. If you are free in January, there is
Yeah, I was.
I would congratulate you.
I really wasn't even. So compared to. It's still not. And we, you can really see training.
Then we know yeah. We kind of split, but yeah, so I handle LA. Yeah. So I do moderation. I do some stuff in the valley.
Say that. Good.
Yeah, if you know.
Well, why do we wait for this?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. You do have questions for us.
Yeah.
They weren't, not yet. They started to go out this high.
Yeah.
As we start. We've been through this. It's been we can all know. There is this stuff that everyone drinks from. And editing it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Thanks to see you. Thanks for seeing you. Yeah. Appreciate it. It was perfect. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you never you know, I litigate, so you go to court side. You can't guarantee it. Yeah, you come with the United Trust. That's the rationale. Or I'm still trying to get we are, you know, like 5 people, now we have 2, so right now it's like drinking from fire hose. So yeah, so I appreciate your insight. I know Meredith. If you're in the office, be willing to meet in person, go around your schedule. But if you'd rather do whatever you want to do.
Whatever works for people. I'll try to.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, but this, like, although she's wearing the fight, they'll probably come the night before, or morning, but yeah. Brutal. I went to a whole beach because I live in South Seattle, so LA, I was like, yeah, LA, I travel. In LA, I was here for hands down, the risk getting into that. No one there. All right. Yeah, it's like an hour and a half. I know. Finalize that get it out.
Victor, appreciate you guys being here. Oh, of course, yeah, no, good to see you guys. Better to see you in person, right?
Now.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. It was nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, apologies. I know we're a few minutes over, but we can gather back. And we are now on to item number 12, which is consideration of a proposed resolution adopting the prohibited wasteful water uses emergency regulation for water conservation. Good to see you, Mr. Nachbauer.
Good morning.
Mr. Rose, Mr. Hune.
Yes, so good morning. I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Chris Hyun and David Rose, and Dr. Hyun will be doing our presentation this morning.
Good morning, good to see you.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. So again, I'm Chris Hyun, State Water Board Climate Lead and Lead for Water Conservation and Emergency Regulations. Again, we've met ORPP Director James Nachbauer and Council David Rose. So I'll present today for your consideration the readoption of the prohibited wasteful water uses emergency regulation for water conservation. Next slide, please. So first, as per the latest available data, California is still in drought. In fact, the Southwest US has been in this drought for the past 3 years and in a mega drought for over 20 years. The water year started dry, but as presented yesterday, even with the recent storms, reservoirs remain low. There's a high chance of a La Nina this winter, which can mean drier conditions in Southern California. And unfortunately, we'll need a well above average water year to bust this drought. All that to say, there is still a need for the state to continue to save water. Next slide, please. However, without board action, our statewide emergency water restrictions will expire in 2023. Several of them will expire this coming January. This top list is from the emergency regulation prohibiting wasteful water uses, which includes no outdoor watering that lets water run off a landscape, no washing vehicles without an automatic shutoff nozzle, no washing hard surfaces like sidewalks, no street cleaning or construction site preparation, no filling decorative fountains, lakes, or ponds without a recirculation pump, and no watering within 48 hours of after rain, which, like the other prohibitions, is currently in effect. It's likely to rain tomorrow here in Sacramento. So as presented yesterday by my teammate Charlotte Ely, sprinklers should be turned off during and at least 2 days after the rain stops. Also, the emergency regulation to reduce water demand will expire this coming June, which includes no watering decorative grass in commercial and institutional areas, including HOA common areas. Urban water suppliers must also implement their local level 2 actions that reduce water use. The water restrictions we're considering readopting today are the ones on the top. set to expire this January. Next slide, please. These state water board regulations are working along with local rules and conservation campaigns. As presented yesterday by my teammate, Dr. Rodero, there have been impressive water savings since the State Water Board adopted these emergency regulations. So considering the current low condition of our reservoirs and the high likelihood of a La Nina this winter, readopting the regulation would continue these water savings benefits. Next slide, please. So if adopted today, the prohibition on wasteful water uses will stay in effect without a gap. As a quick timeline, the original regulation went into effect last January. For the readoption, a notice was posted in November. In terms of comments, we received a few comment letters, all in support of the readoption, one even wanting the restrictions to be permanent and include grass landscaping reduction, but we're not prepared to do that right now. Today, the board is considering readoption. If readopted today, then it will be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law, and depending on their process, the readopted regulation should be approved by December 19th and will be in effect for up to 1 year from the approved date. Next slide, please. Folks can go to bit.ly/conservationreg, all lowercase, for updates and more information on this and other statewide emergency water restrictions. They can also find a frequently asked questions document, which will be updated in January, a review of HOA requirements. They can find regulation documents, as well as sign up for updates on conservation regulations. Next slide, please. As a reminder, folks should be saving water and saving trees. Our statewide water restrictions do not prohibit watering trees, and tree health should be maintained. Furthermore, the regulations do not prohibit using water for immediate health and safety needs. Local water suppliers may have adopted stricter water conservation measures, so check for additional restrictions in your area. And violations may be punishable by a fine up to $500 per day. Next slide, please. If folks see a potential violation of state or local water restrictions, they can go to savewater.ca.gov to report water waste. They can use their smartphone web browser or their computers. Anyone can file a complaint. They can upload photos, and those reports are sent to their local water supplier and the State Water Board. Next slide, please. And folks can go to saveourwater.com to learn how to save water. And how to save trees while saving water. And they can also find their local water agency. It's also in Spanish at savewater.com/es. They can also check their local water supplier for financial assistance, including for grass removal and landscaping. And that takes us to the end of our presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. I appreciate the good presentation. The prohibitions, I think at this point, everyone feels are pretty straightforward, and it really shows ultimately it's been impressive to see Californians really shift in their usage. The prohibitions have been part of that, and so has been moving folks to stage 2 of their water shortage contingency plans. And so, these are very common sense. I'm very much in support. I don't have any questions further, but I look to colleagues if we do. And we do have a couple commenters here as well then to go to. And seeing nothing from the Vice Chair and Board Member Morgan, we can go to our first commenter, who is Kimberly Burr.
Can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Hi, thank you all for letting me speak this afternoon or this morning. And I just wanted to thank you again for extending these emergency regulations. I'm over here in the Russian River area on Green Valley Creek. And I just keep remembering, that I think it's 80% of our water is consumed by agriculture. And so I don't think some of our emergency regs don't reach into that sphere. So I'm wondering if sometime in the future that could happen. Out here on the coast, we don't get, snow melt and different things. We don't have to deal with the California State Water Project or anything, but we still have significant demands from agriculture on our streams. So I've kind of looked for you guys to extend emergency regulations in the Russian River and maybe expand them so that we have a chance of recovering our fish and protecting our communities with more accurate and timely emergency regulations in our watershed. So I think this is great, and I think it's important, and I support your efforts to equitably share all the state's water and public trust resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burr. I really appreciate your time and your good comments. It's not lost on me, this current turn of the drought, if you will. It was the Russian River that the governor went down and had the first executive order. And when you look at the model of how the state has responded, how communities have responded, I'm incredibly proud of the work that has gone on in the Russian River, because it has been around conservation. And we saw that with the incredible amounts of conservation that had to go into place because on the urban side, because we knew the circumstances really warranted it. But importantly, and to your note, it's not just about urban conservation that gets us through these issues in drought. It is around how we curtail as well, and how we, as a whole, and here systemically approach what our effects on drinking water supplies. And here, to your point, curtailments are how we ensure, just at that watershed level where there's a lot of engagement and withdrawal from ag, that we're all doing our part. We're all living by what are, I know, unfortunate and difficult circumstances, but I'm incredibly impressed in the way that the watershed has simply come together, understood that conservation and administration of rights and all these things come together in a way that has helped us through, but we still need to continue to focus on how we continue to contribute to more. And so just thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Burr, and the perspective that you brought in your comments.
Thanks for your leadership too.
Thank you. And we have our last commenter, who is Blake Anderson.
Okay, sorry, let me see later. Oh, okay. Hi, yeah, I'm Blake Anderson. I'm just a homeowner in San Diego City. Yeah, I just had a comment on, thought I would comment on that I support the staff's recommendation to extend the temporary emergency rule. And more specifically, I mean, I haven't researched all the aspects of the rule, but definitely when it pertains to, like, for example, like basic power washing of public property sidewalks, that's more my focus. So yeah, I do support that recommendation. I appreciate the board's efforts in monitoring water wasting. And then also, I guess I'll just comment on just one of my concerns, and hopefully, well, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming the board's aware, there's many government economic development departments in California, and I'm assuming many of them have government contracts with workers who are doing power washing of public sidewalks in commercial areas. And I feel that I strongly and officially recommend that severe penalties be imposed on those agencies if they refuse to stop violating the temporary emergency rule. So I just feel they're extremely unethical, and those contracts are being used to just keep their budgets maintained and their headcounts maintained, by administering those power washing contracts. So yeah, I just wanted to bring awareness on that. And yeah, hopefully you guys will be extremely aggressive against those agencies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments and time today, Mr. Anderson, and engagement on the item and support. Thank you. And, maybe less my place to comment, but I will say, I think I know some of that power washing, especially in the San Diego area, may be due to public health issues or public health needs. And there are exemptions, I believe, in our reg that still allow for the continuation, even though there are prohibitions of some of that activity, especially if it's for public health reasons and other emergency reasons. But Mr. Rose, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think we could comment on a specific instance, but you're right. The regulation does exempt any of the prohibited uses as needed for human health and safety purposes. And what you said hits right directly on one of those, which is if there's a human health and safety need to clean a specific surface with power washing, that would be expected. I think the commenter is also right to flag the regular contractual power washing when not needed for human health and safety. So we're definitely trying to monitor that and see what's occurring and make sure that the regulation is not just adopted, but implemented.
Really appreciate that and appreciate the flag, Mr. Anderson.
Just wanted to add or ask that staff could maybe reiterate the pathways for the public to report concerns around waste occurrences.
Yeah, one of the best ways is to go through the portal, savewater.ca.gov, and there they can anonymously report and take a photo and geolocate a specific place. And that's one of the best places because then once you geolocate, it can go to the right water supplier to let people that are closer to the ground investigate and see what's happening. Again, that report is also sent to us at the State Water Board. And we do look into either reports that are outside of jurisdictions of water suppliers and larger, more egregious reports. It is mobile friendly. You can use your web browser in your iPhone or Android phone.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate the tools that have been developed, the data. It's always incredibly impressive, especially in the conservation side where, that information just leads to behavior change, right? It helps us even understand where to best focus. So thank you. Board members, anything further to discuss, anything to flag? Again, I know these are pretty straightforward regs, but they've been effective. And so really appreciate that.
I don't have anything to add, and I just appreciate staff's work and echo all the comments that you said. I look forward to continuing the work to try to achieve the conservation that we need to do in this time, and ultimately make it a way of life. So I am happy to make a motion on adopting the proposed resolution. But open if other board members want further discussion.
Great, thank you. Ms. Tyler, can you please call the roll call vote?
Okay. Board Member Firestone?
Aye.
Board Member Morgan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo?
Aye.
Chair Escobar?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. The vote is unanimous and the resolution and the prohibition of the wasteful practices are readopted. This is because they're emergency regs. They'll come up next year again if we're going to need them for the year. Hopefully not, but we'll just continue to see how the water year plays out. So thank you. That concludes item number 12 and brings us to our last item of the agenda, which is item number 13, board member reports. Would anyone like to, as we all know, then start to pull up our calendars?
I'll just say I don't have a report.
Okay. That's a all right. Where's my, I would flag that. Okay. My calendar isn't loading as quickly as I'd like. So I'll go off of memory, which is last week. I know a number of board members, and I know Board Member Firestone, you were ill and not able to attend, but it was a good convening of the Association of California Water Agencies in Indian Wells in the Coachella Valley. That previous week, I was home for Thanksgiving, had driven down my partner and dog, drove back, and then was down in the desert yet again. And it was nice to be able to be in my home community with the rest of the water community as well. Spoke on a couple of panels, one on the water supply strategy and another on the SAFER program. And Greg Pierce was on that panel with us. He's fantastic as always, as well as Danielle Coates, and Cindy Tuck was our moderator. So felt fortunate to be out and about. I know I continue to reflect and remark, these last months have, for all of us, I know we've had a lot more travel, a lot more engagement, and it's been good to have it. Continue to be able to hear how we are doing on drought response. And, I know Vice Chair will talk about this, but in the panel she was on, but we continue to just receive such strong feedback on what an incredible job our folks are doing. And I know, and certainly not that we're doing everything perfect. People aren't being ridiculous, but what I think everyone senses here is an openness and a willingness to just try to do better by the very challenging issues that are before the board and that we all collectively are contributing to. So it was great to be out. Appreciated the invitation and seeing folks.
Okay, well, I'll just add to that Aqua was great. And I just really appreciated the feedback that I kept hearing, which was they just really appreciate our presence. You know, whether on individual issues they Aqua members agree with us or not, it wasn't the issue. It was just that we were there and participating and just available for folks to come up to us and chat sort of offline about their thoughts. Did hear, you know, a lot of interest in what we'll be doing this year with water use efficiency. And then as to the panels that I was involved in, one on the Russian River, and I just want to give, I know it's all of us giving our thanks to Sam Bull and Brian. He was on a panel with me, and you could just really see there was a lot of participation from local stakeholders, and they just really appreciated Sam's thoughtfulness, his attention, and just the amount of time. They really understood that this was a heavy lift for our board, but they also realized at the highest levels that we were supporting working together with local stakeholders toward a potential voluntary agreement. And so I'm excited about seeing how things play out. Of course, there's that Potter Valley project that, you know, and the variants that may continue to cause some challenges for the voluntary agreement, but broad interest in continuing those discussions. And then the other panel that I spoke on, I appeared before the Groundwater Committee. They had asked Board Member Firestone to participate, but because she wasn't able to attend, I was on a panel with Paul Goslin talking about Sigma implementation. Really good discussion there. And then I just want to double check. The coastal hearing room looks like it's.
Yeah, we're here. Sorry,
Okay.
Vice Chair. We are here. We have a slight power outage, so we're kind of in the dark.
Okay.
But you know, yeah.
Well, sometimes that happens where, you know, you're on the phone and you keep talking and then you realize the other
Exactly.
person
It's
isn't
like, wait a
there,
minute,
so-
did I lose connection?
Okay. All right. And then I just had two others. I, along with Board Member McGuire, went on a great tour that Sustainable Conservation put together. We went out and went to the community of Fairmead and heard about their challenges with drinking water and water quality. And I viewed it as a good opportunity for us to interact directly with the community. But also they had a lot of board members from Sustainable Conservation, and it was a great opportunity for Board Member McGuire and I to give an update on the SAFER program. And there was a lot of interest by Sustainable Conservation. I know that their leadership is very much engaged in this, but we were there the day before their board meeting. So we were lucky enough to be able to get quite a number of board members that were also involved in the tour. And then we went to a groundwater recharge project and to a sustainable farming operation in Madera County. And then right before Aqua, I joined Board Member Morgan on a tour that staff put together to visit with some of the smaller communities, the city of Isleton and Rio Vista, to have a discussion with their local leaders on the sanitary sewer reissuance, and then also just a good opportunity to better understand some of the challenges that those communities are facing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vice Chair. We're still here in the dark. Actually, I have my phone, so you can maybe see my face a little better.
Okay, now it's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just have one more to add, and so just echo, the comments about it was really great just to be able to be at Aqua and to engage and to listen to stakeholders. On Thursday, December 1st, I spoke on a water use efficiency panel that was moderated by Elizabeth Lowstead with the San Diego County Water Authority. So on the panel was Joe with Flume, which is the devices that are put on meters. It was really interesting to hear an update on the data from Flume and from Joe, and just to see, the changes in use when someone has that type of a device on their meter and be able to see real-time data, and that just awareness, and just where they how they are adjusting they're using machine learning to understand better water use. So that was really interesting to hear an update there. You guys are in light again. And then also on the panel was Fiona Sanchez with Irvine Ranch Water District, who spoke to the 30 years of investments that the district has made to water conservation, and just, how far they have come over the past 30 years and where they are now. And so that was, it was really interesting. And then also to hear from the audience of just their questions and around water use efficiency. So that it was a good panel, and it was a good day and good week to be there and to engage with stakeholders.
Thank you, board member. And yes, we're back here with the lights on, although it was a little fun being here in the dark. We were using our phones. Board meetings can be exciting. Okay. Board member reports are wrapped up. We don't have an executive director's report right now, so I think we're good. And we'll go to closed session and then we'll be adjourned thereafter. And then our next board meeting is on Wednesday, January 4th. If you notice, there was a lot that went on these last 2 days, and it's because we did want to try to protect that second board meeting to give people a bit of a break. So we will not see everyone until the new year. But anything I'm missing, Mr. Lawfer, then great. We will be in closed session, and then we will adjourn, and then otherwise we'll see everyone next year. Thank you everyone for an incredible year. Looking forward to another incredible year next year. Thanks all.
And the only thing I would ask, it's about 11:44 for the board members who are participating remotely. Do we want, I think we're going to keep it all remote for the closed session. Everybody should have it in their calendar, the link, and start up at about noon at this point.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.